We're learning the Sikha on Asara B'Tevis in Chelek Tezvav on page 412. The Shir today is being learned Lili Nishmas Rabbi Yosef ben Yamin ben Rabbi Menashe Koltman. Asara B'Tevis is Chal Alamal B'Smichas the Shabbos Parshas Vayigash. The fast of Asara B'Tevis, which is the day that Yerushalayim was placed under siege, is a fast that always falls out in the time near the Shabbos of Parshas Vayigash. Vibalt as a tiny is bekulon yesh shayches loisna parshas shecholis behen. Since, as the Shalah HaKadosh writes, that the week and the parsha that you read that week, whatever yontiv or event falls out in that week, is connected to the parsha of that week. Is move on as to the tzaim from Asara B'Tevis at shayches to Parshas Vayigash. So it's understood that the fast day of Asara B'Tevis is connected to Parshas Vayigash. V'yesh loima. Now we can add to this and say, as Asara B'Tevis is the Rishon Sheirish from Ala Dalat Tzeimus, since Asara B'Tevis is the first and it's the source that caused all the other negative events, the tragedies that happened that led finally to the Churban Beis HaMikdash. So it all begins with Asara B'Tevis. K'lekaman Sifta Zayin, as will be brought later in Sifta Zayin, that this is why there's a special stringency in this fast, is the Shayches between Parshas Vayigash and Asara B'Tevis. So the connection of the Parsha with Asara B'Tevis is nitno mitzad den pratis de geminyan von Tzema Siri. It's not only with the fast of this fast, which in the Lashon of the Pasuk is called the fast of the 10th month, which is Tevis, but not oich mitzad the minyan haklali von the Dal Tzemis. But there's a connection in the Parsha to the general union of all the fasts, which Asara B'Tevis is the beginning and source of all of them. An additional point, on a yais as the mechuven v'tachlis von the Dal Tzemis of the Inyani HaChurban, is bichdei as al zayin the binyan Beis HaMikdash chulu. Now, since the purpose and the goal of all of the fasts and all matters that are related to the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash is that it will lead eventually to the rebuilding of the third Beis HaMikdash, und die Tzeimis sollen battle werden und werden Yomim Tovim, and all these fasts will be nullified and will become days of a Yom Tov. Kemen sagen, so we can also say as the Shayches zwischen Parshas Vayigash and the Dalet Tzeimis, the connection of the Parsha, Parshas Vayigash, and the four fasts is be'ikir in the mechuven von the Tzeimis. It's primarily the connection is in the real purpose of all these fasts, wie die Tzeimis vel'n zayin lasted lavai. How these fasts are going to be and what they're going to turn into when Mashiach comes, that will be Yom Tovim. So here, going forward in the Sikha, the Rebbe will explain from the Parsha and then primarily bring from the Lashon of the Rambam regarding this subject, where we see what's going to be with all these days of fasts, lost Lavai, and where we see the connection to the Parsha. So first with the Parsha. The Teichel from Parshas Vayigash is ungedated wie by the Yede Sedre in Yinomen Vayigash, the Agasha from Yehuda Yosef. So the content of this Parsha, as indicated in its name, like every Parsha, Vayigash is where Yehuda comes near Yosef. Was the Far is the Haftarah from the Sedre, was Haftarahs Zeramen Yonoshal Parsha, and therefore also the Haftarah, which every Haftarah is from the same subject of the Parsha, wegen dem Ichud von Yehuda und Yosef, was wird sein lasset love. It also speaks about the union between Yehuda and Yosef, which will be when Mashiach comes. As they vel'n veren la'achadim, they will be one. Was das is al derech hagashas Yehuda Yosef, similar to Yehuda coming close to Yosef. That's one general theme of the Parsha and the Haftarah. Noch an akude benegeh da Agasha von Yehuda ve Yosef was wird gebracht in the Haftarah. Another point about the coming close and the union between Yehuda and Yosef, which is expressed in the Haftarah. Hagam Yehuda ve Yosef vel'n zayin lachadim kanal. Even though, yes, it says when Mashiach comes, Yehuda and Yosef will both be one. Von deswegen, nevertheless, wird Yehuda haben a Maila of Yosef. Yehuda will still have an advantage and be on a higher level than Yosef. But the Far is Dafke with David Avdi Nasilem Loilam. And therefore, as it says in the Haftarah, David, being the descendant of Yehuda, will be the one that will be the leader over them, including Yosef. Und die zwei Nekudas anal, was wollen sein lasset lovai. These 2 points which will be when Mashiach comes, which are the Ichud from Yehuda and Yosef, on one hand the union between Yehuda and Yosef, and as Yehuda is the Ikke, and at the same time that Yehuda is higher and is more important than Yosef, and he's the leader over Yosef. We also find this reflected in the fast days, the way they will be when Mashiach comes. Wie der Rambam bringt in Seifel Chestinius, the Yud, that the Rambam brings in the end of Hilchas Tinius, the promise and the Nevuah, as li Yemais HaMashiach, weil die Zeimis neshapach werden, leveis Yehuda, that these fast days will be transformed for Beis Yehuda as L'sasan or L'simcha, days of joy and gladness, or L'mayedim Tevim, and days of a Yom Tiv, and V'ha'emes, V'ha'shalem Ehevu, and the truth and peace will be loved. Which means, what we see here hinted in the way the Rambam describes this, the pasuk that he brings, Hagam Sevetzayim V'ha'emes, Ha'shalem Ehevu. On one hand, the Rambam concludes with a pasuk about the truth and peace which will be loved, which is an inyan von Esachtus. That is the idea of union, the oneness between Yehuda and Yosef. Ava Pikein, werd ausgeteilt, Dafke, Beis Yehuda. On the other hand, the pasuk does single out amongst all Yidden, Beis Yehuda, the power of Yehuda, of Shevet Yehuda, and of Yehuda over Klal Yisrael. Kidl Kamon, Sif Daled, with Sif Yud Beis, as will be explained in Sif Daled, and later in the Sikh in Sif Yud Beis, about what's significant about pointing out Dafke Yehuda here. Und der Inyan, and this subject here, was in dem Hepech Hatzemis La'asad Lavai, telt Penois Beis Yehuda, the fact that when it comes to the transformation of the fast days when Mashiach comes, we single out Beis Yehuda out of all of Klal Yisrael. This is also uniquely connected to the fast day in the 10th month, Asara B'Tevis, as we explained in Sif Yud Zayin of the Sikha. Okay, so as you see over here, we have a lot in store, all the way up to Sif Yud Zayin, explaining what the transformation of the fast days includes in it, various different levels and degrees to this, and ultimately the Rebbe will explain how all of this is expressed to the greatest degree in the transformation of Asara B'Tevis. So let's begin. The Rebbe here will go through very, very in detail and analyze the words of the Rambam that was just quoted here in the end of Hilchas Tainis. Wenn wir das verstehen, behaktem Abir in the Aloha Anal and Rambam will understand all of this by first explaining the words of the Rambam in the end of Hilchas Tainis. V'zel Shayna, and this is the full quote of the Rambam. Kol hatzeimis ha'elo asidnli botli meisa Mashiach. All of the fast days mentioned here will be nullified in the days when Mashiach comes. V'lo and not only this, el shem asidim liyais yomim tovim, in the future they're going to be days of a Yom Tiv, v'yimei sasam v'simcha, days of joy. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Koi Yom Hashem Tzvois, Tzayma Revi, V'tzayma Chamishi, V'tzayma Shvi, V'tzayma Asiri. These are the fast days related to the Churban Mabayis, Tzayma Revi being Shavasa B'Tammuz, Tzayma Chamishi being Tisha B'Av, and then Tzayma Shvi being Tzayma Gedalia, and Tzayma Asiri is mentioned, Asar B'Tevis. All of these fast days, Yiyah LeBeis Yehuda, L'sasan, L'simcha will be for Beis Yehuda, days of joy, U'l'mayedim Tevim, and Ayam Tev, Ha'emes, V'Ashalom Ehevu, and love, and or rather truth and peace will be loved. That's the full quote of the end of the Rambam Hilchas Tainis. The Makkah von der Halacha is in Tosefta Seif Tainis. The Rambam is taking this from what it says also in Tosefta at the conclusion of Masechta Tainis. Abedart is the Lashon, however, there, the Lashon of the Tosefta is not exactly the same as the Lashon of the Rambam. In the Tosefta it says, Oisam Yomim, these days here, the fast days, Asidin Liyos Yomim Tevim Liyisrael, are going to be days of Yom Tov for Yidden. Shenema Kayam Hashem Tzayma Revi V'Gayim, and he quotes to the pasuk of Tzayma Revi as the Rambam quotes. Okay, but the Rambam here, as you can see, changes, adds to what it says in the Tosefta. Darfum verstehen. So the question here is, Aleph, number one. Was is the Rambam mechalek der minyan in zwei bavos? Why does the Rambam divide the transformation of the fast days when Mashiach comes into two different stanzas, two different points here? Aleph, kol hatzeimis ha'elo asidin li batel cholo. One point is that all the fast days will be nullified. And then Beis, the Rambam adds like a new point, v'lo yoid, and not only this, elo, an additional point, shem hasidin li yom tovim cholo, that will be days of a Yom Tov. Und sagt nicht bekitze wie in Tosefta, the Rambam doesn't simply say short as it says it in the Tosefta, including it all in one, that Asidin Liyas Yom Tovim Chulu, that the fast days when Mashiach come will be days, good days, Yom Tovim. But das meint b'derech memela, as Yitzayim is well in bottle werden, which is included, it's self-understood, that means that the fast of these days will be nullified. Why does the Rambam divide it into two? Beis, another question here is, Favos is a mashmit, a vort, Asidin Liyas Yom Tovim Chulu li Yisrael. Why does the Rambam omit the word that it says in Tosefta, that these will be Yomim Tovim for Yidden? Versteht in Tosefta, as it says in Tosefta. L'chayre is the Yisafah Machrachas. Now, at first glance, to add that word Li Yisrael is a necessary word here. In the pasuk it says that this will be a day of joy for Beis Yehuda, and the reason why in the pasuk it says Beis Yehuda, while the pasuk Pshutai red wegen dem Zman from Beis Sheni, because the pasuk in its simple meaning is speaking about the time period of the second Beis Hamikdash was damold is nach Aseres Hashvatim leishavu. The 10 Shvatim did not return from their galus. Darf men doch meisav sein, so therefore it's necessary to clarify and add here, as li meisa Mashiach, velon di tzem is very yomim tovim for all Yidden. That then, in the times of when Mashiach comes, so these fast days will be completely nullified, and it will be a joy and a day of Yontif for all Yidden. Kail the Aseres HaShvatim, including the Aseres HaShvatim that will return as well. So why doesn't the Rambam add that clarification, li Yisrael? Gimel, the third question here is, was is negeya tzem inyan da the siyam akosiv ha'emes va'asholem ahevu? Why does the Rambam bring the conclusion of the pasuk of emes v'asholem ahevu, which is not quoted in the Tosefta? I mean, in the Tosefta it says v'gaimer. I didn't see it inside, but the Rambam here, maybe this is a question both in the Rambam and the Tosefta. Why the conclusion where the Rambam clearly brings the pasuk v'emes v'asholem ahevu? Why is this last few words relevant for the point of the transformation of the fasts? So first, the Rabbi answers part of these questions as follows: V'shleima as die zwei letzte kushis, the last two questions, why the Rambam omits the word Yisrael, but he does write these three words of ha'emes v'shalom ha'hevu. These two questions answer each other. Today, it's a klar machen as die tzeimis wollen sein yomim tovim for alle Yidden, to make clear that these yomim tovim will be for all of Klal Yisrael. Chachas and pasuk state lebeis Yehuda, even though in the pasuk it only says about Beis Yehuda. Brengt the Rambam moich the siyam akosov ha'emes v'shalom ha'hevu. So the Rambam quotes the end these words of ha'emes v'shalom ha'hevu. Bal tas lasad lavoi v'zayin shalom. So what this end of the pasuk proves is, since when Mashiach comes there'll be peace. Kail aloich zwischen Beis Yehuda mit Yosef. That includes that there'll be peace amongst all Yidden between Yehuda and Yosef. Kanasiv Beis, as mentioned before, that's the meaning of these words here. V'emes v'shalom ha'hevu. The main point here is the shalom that will be with all Yidden. The simcha from Beis Yehuda arum nemen al Yidden. So the joy that the pasuk says that there will be by Yehuda will include all Yidden, oich the Aseres HaShvatim, including the 10 Shvatim. That's understood. So the Rambam doesn't have to say Yisrael because he quotes the end of the pasuk va'emes v'shalom ha'hevu. As bleibt aber nicht move on. However, what's not understood here is was ist das der Rambam meramis durch meitig sein die Werte va'emes v'shalom ha'hevu. Why does the Rambam hint this by bringing the end of the pasuk v'emes v'shalom ha'hevu und sagt nicht beferisch wie in Tosefta as die Tag wollen sein yomim tovim Yisrael, and doesn't clearly say that it'll be yomim tovim for Yidden, and he leaves it in the way the pasuk says it, that it'll be yomim tovim for Beis Yehuda, and v'emes v'shalom ha'hevu then comes to add to hint this idea that it'll also include Beis Yisrael. But it seems like that the source of the Yom Tif primarily does come from Beis Yehuda. Why is that so? This is the Rambam. Now, let's compare what it says in the Rambam to the way this concept is brought in the Torah. Noch kemen fragen, additionally can be asked, Euchen Tor, Seifel Chesteines, bringt sich der Teuchen von der Minyan Anal. So the Torah brings the same content, the same idea regarding the fast when Mashiach comes. Not in Torah is the Lashon. However, the Torah says a different thing, a different language here. When Mashiach comes, the Eibusher will transform these days to joy. As the pasuk says, and the Torah quotes a different pasuk, I will transform the mourning into joy. I will console them. And I will bring them joy from the times when they were crying and mourning. That's the pasuk that the Torah brings. Is nicht move on. So the question over here is, was bringt der Rambam the pasuk from Zechariah? Why does the Rambam quote the pasuk of Zechariah where it says Tzayim Revi, Tzayim Chamishi, that it'll be l'sasan or l'simcha? Was retzich lefi pshutai wegen zman from Beis Sheni. That pasuk, in its simple meaning, is not talking about Lasad Lavai. It's talking about the time period of Beis Sheni. Mit der Adgasha leBeis Yehuda dafke, and in that pasuk it speaks just about Beis Yehuda. Be'eis hat gekent bringen wie in Tur the pasuk war fachti evlam l'sasan geimer, while the Rambam could quote this pasuk that the Torah brings. Was bepashtes, was red bepashtes wegen des Mandelasit. And this is a pasuk which, in its simple meaning, is speaking about the time when Mashiach comes, Lasad Lavai. So this would be seemingly a more appropriate source of the pasuk to quote here regarding the transformation of the fasts when Mashiach comes. Yeshleimar as die zwei Shinuyim zwischen Rambam and Tur. The two differences that we see here between the Rambam and the Tur, Aleph and Rambam sind dort zwei Boves, in Tur ein Bove. The Rambam brings this subject in 2 points, and the Tur just says 1 point. And Beis, the second thing, as just pointed out, and Rambam brings that the pasuk Koyama Goyme, Tzoyim Goyme, Yeh Goyme, Lesosen Goyme. The Rambam brings the pasuk of Zcharia, and in Tur the pasuk V'afachti Goyme. These two differences between the Tur and the Rambam are dependent one on the other, Kidle Kaman, as will be explained here. So here, the Rebbe will get into a lengthy discussion to understand the various different points and stages in the transformation of the fast when Mashiach comes. And that will then bring us back to the understanding of the pasuk that the Tur brings and the pasuk that the Rambam brings. Wir das verstehen durch Mevai sein, dem Chiluk in Teuchen zwischen die zwei Oibinamante Psukim. Let's understand the difference in the content of the meaning of these two psukim mentioned. One is Yeh Goyme L'Sasen Goyme. So the emphasis here is on the word Yeh, that the fast days will be days of joy. And then On V'afachti Goyme. In the pasuk that the Tur quotes from Yirmiyah, there it uses a different expression that says V'afachti, that will be a transformation. What is the difference between these two expressions? So, as far as the fast days when Mashiach comes, in the Shinui was V'tzachayvtan, in the Tzaymis Lasad Love, the change that will be with the fast days when Mashiach comes, in a Faran Drai Inyanim. There are 3 different aspects to this change. Aleph, the first point is the Tzaymis Villen Bottle werden. These fast days will be nullified. This haste. And what this means is Vibal, das Demult wird sein Amatzu von Yesh Shalom. Since then it will be a time period when there will be peace. This is the expression the Gemara uses regarding these fast days, when it's a time of peace. So then, wird bottle werden der Chiyuv zu fasten cholo. In such a time period, so the obligation to fast will be nullified because there's peace in the world. Wie the pasuk, wie the psak as yesh shalom is ein misanan, as the psak in Shulchan Aruch, that in a time when there's peace, then you don't fast. That's the first point, that the fast will be nullified. Beis, the second point is nit nor velen ze danet sein ken yom gemeit sein. Not only will there not be days of fast, nor ze vel noich sein yomim tovim v'yemei simcha. Rather, there'll also be days of a yom tiv and days of joy. Now, why is this so? V'yeshleima as das gufe was megeht reis from the matzav ha'metzayer gzeres ha'malchus und ein shalom. So the very fact that you leave such a time period in such a condition where there's decrees of the government against Yidden, and there's a time where there's no peace, and that's the cause for the sadness, and it's the cause for the fast, the very fact that you leave such a kind of situation. And now, when Mashiach comes, we're in a time where there's peace, and it's joy, or rather, there's no reason to fast. That itself is inspires and awakens that this is a time of joy, the fact that we got rid of this situation and this time of sadness. That's the second point. Yeah, so this is the second point, that it will be days of joy. However, the days of joy here is not really a completely new point. This is an automatic outcome of the fact that the days of sadness and the days of fasting are over. Gimel, then though, there's a third point, and this is a new idea. Not only these days will not be days of fast, rather they'll be days of a Yom Tiv, nor Nachmer. Furthermore, the Inyan, Hatzayim Gufe, the very suffering itself, which is the reason for the fast, the sadness, and the very source of this suffering and the fast itself, that will be transformed. The negativity, the tragedy itself will be transformed into a reason and a cause for celebration and joy. That's a completely new concept, a big chiddush. Al derech v'yeshteit, and this is like what it says, also the nevuah lasad lavoi oitcha avaya ki anaftabi. We will thank the Eibishter for all of the suffering that happened at the time of Galus. As la asad lavoi v'zayin der oitcha defar vas anaftabi. When Mashiach comes, we'll see what really was behind all of the suffering. What was the real good inside all of the suffering? And therefore then we will have the ability to thank the Eibishter for the very suffering itself. That's a new idea, a transformation of the very suffering itself to become a source of joy and celebration. Those are the 3 points and the transformation of the fast when Mashiach comes. Now, these 3 points about the fast day is related to the Avodah V'Yid. And what's the reason for this? Tainis is midarki tshuvahu. As the Rambam says in the beginning of Hilchos Tainis, that fasting is one of the ways of tshuva. So we can also find regarding tshuva, and specifically a tshuva that is a result of a love, an intense love a Yid has for the Eibishter, and that brings him to do tshuva. So we find regarding this tshuva an example, the 3 stages here that we see in the fast and the transformation of the fast into becoming a time that's good, also when it comes to tshuva, returning from a place that was bad to coming to reconnecting to Hashem. Aleph, the first point is, durch tshuva mi'ave vert nekar avayne mit chilosei. When a person does a full tshuva with love, so then it completely uproots the aveda from its root. The avedas werden bottle. All the avedas become completely nullified, similar to the fast days becoming totally nullified. Bay is the second point. There was tshuva me'ave, one that does tshuva out of love. So what does this love bring out in him? How is this tshuva expressed? Is meisiv b'maisav atovim yesem mechdei atzorech legabei yisraven. He will come and he'll have the motivation and the excitement to add more good deeds, more positive things in that area where the aveda was done. So durch dem wird nit nur bottled the avedas. So therefore, through this tshuva, not only does he nullify the sin and the effect of the sin, nor es kommt noch zu he suffer from meisem tovim legabei yisraven. Rather, this tshuva brings him to even add and increase more in this area where this avera was. That's similar to the second point, where the very fact that a person leaves this negative place, it in itself becomes a reason for celebration now, where he's ready to add more and increase more in this area. Gimel, the third point there is, through a tshuva that comes with love, the sins itself, premeditated sins, are then transformed into becoming merits. Which means, besides the fact that through the tshuva, the person now gets involved in his excitement of doing other good deeds and mitzvahs and more merits, the premeditated sins themselves, the energy that went into those sins themselves, they become elevated and transformed into now being merits for this person. That's the third idea, where the negativity itself becomes a source of merits. Like the third point of the transformation of the fast days, that the very tragedy itself becomes a source now of celebration. So we can say, as geschehen, wie the klolos in Agul is abhängig in Seif Yisrael las Tshuva kipsaka Rambam. Just like the Rambam says in Hilchos Tshuva regarding Agula, regarding redemption, the coming of Mashiach, that it's dependent on Yidden doing Tshuva. That's what brings the Gula. The same could be said regarding nullifying and transforming the fasts. Then when Mashiach comes in the Drei Ifanu Manal, in the 3 aspects and the 3 levels of the full transformation of these fasts, as das wird aufgetan durch Shleimus HaTshuva von Yidden, Tshuva Mi'ave, and die 3 Yonim Shabbat. This is accomplished through Tshuva and through the Shleimus of Tshuva, and the 3 aspects of Tshuva Mi'ave, and that brings a transformation of the fasts on the 3 levels mentioned before. Okay, so this is the explanation there for the 3 aspects of transforming the fast and the getting rid of, nullifying the negativity, the sadness of the fast. Then it becomes a day of joy because that negativity and that source of tragedy is gone. And then the third point, where the tragedy itself, the reason for fasting itself, the suffering, gets transformed and becomes a source for joy and celebration. So here, the Rebbe continues and explains that now we can understand why the Rambam and the Tur bring up this inyan in their Sefer, even though it's a Sefer of Halachas. Damit kann man verstehen, with this we could also understand, Atmiya Klolis in the Halacha Anal from Rambam, a general question that we could ask on this Halacha, the way it's brought in the Rambam, and also the similar question is regarding the fact that this is brought in Tur and in Shulchan Aruch. Der Teuchen von Sefer Hayad is Baloshna Rambam in sein Hagdome zum Sefer Hayad, halachas halachas. The Rambam only brings things that are actual halachas, things that are relevant, la'alacha l'maisa. Is tzarech lahavin? If so, the question we have to understand there is, in was pashteti halacha in them, was kol hatzayim sa'elo asidin li batel chulo. What is the halachic aspect of this idea that the Rambam tells us about the nevuah, lasad lavai, that all the fasts will be bottled then? Und in Rambam can we verämpfern. Now, regarding the Rambam, that he brings this, we can answer and say, as das ist der Fall, was in Sifra Yada Chazake bringt euch Dinim, was in einem Nigel im Eisa Mashiach. The Rambam brings halachas that are relevant for the time of Mashiach. So he's letting you know, the halacha, that when Mashiach comes, these are days that you will not have to fast anymore. So that's simple. Aber das ist nicht kein Teretz, für was der Inje wird gebracht, euch in Tur v'Shulchan Aruch. For sie bringen nicht die Dinim, was eine Shaykh zu Eisa Mashiach. It doesn't explain why these halachas are brought in Tur v'Shulchan Aruch, which do not ever quote halachas that are relevant when Mashiach comes. Is the beer but based on what was explained before regarding the various different levels of transforming the fasts and how the tshuva, that what the tiniest are really about, is also on the same level, the same three things that corresponding to this. So we can understand the mit is mevuer. With this, it's explained in what way a person should go into fasting. Fasting is not just simply abstaining from eating and so on. But what if tiniest really is? The tshuva from them tiniest. The tshuva of the fast day, ukanal as a tainus midarkei tshuvahu, fasting is one of the ways of doing tshuva. It should be with a tshuva to such a degree, that it should accomplish biz as the tzayim gufes on the sapach veron l'staston l'simcha v'chulu. Such an intense level of tshuva to the point that the tshuva me'ava accomplishes that the sins itself become transformed into merits, and so too the tiniest themselves, as a result, become transformed in to become a source of joy and celebration. Okay, so now coming back to the psukim that the Rambam brings and the Torah brings regarding this transformation of the fast lost at Rabbi. Das ist echt der Chelek in Teichen zwischen die zwei psukim. This is the difference in the content of the two psukim quoted regarding this. Der Pasuk Tzayim Revi Goyme Chamishi Goyme Yeh Goyme. The pasuk that the Rambam quotes, Tzayim Revi, and then it says that it's going to be L'sasen L'simcha L'moedim Goyme. It's going to be days of joy, days of a Yom Tiv. It's talking about the days. What's going to happen to these days? As the tag that these days that were once before a days of fasting and sadness, the days will now become days of joy. This says, in addition to the fact that the fasts on the days will be nullified, it'll also have an advantage as the tag that if these days that were a day of tragedy are now, the tragedies are gone, so this itself is a reason for celebration. But it's all relating to the fact that the days will change. What the days were before and what the days will be now when Mashiach comes. Aber the pasuk v'afachti evlam l'sasen goymer, in the pasuk where it says, Hashem says, I will transform the mourning into joy. Red wegen dem etzem evel gufa. It's speaking about the very mourning itself. As the inyan ha'evel, that the mourning, the source of the sadness that comes from whatever tragedy that causes the mourning, that itself will be transformed and become a source of joy and celebration. That's a whole different idea. Not talking about the days, that what they were before and what they become now, but the actual sadness and tragedy itself will be transformed into joy. The difference between these two psukim is because it's speaking about different time periods. The pasuk sayim goyme yeh goyme red wegen des man from Bei Sheni Kanal Sif Gimel. That's a pasuk which in its simple pshat is talking about the time of the second Beis Hamikdash. Und wie bald as Beweis Sheni haben gefällt die heit Dvarim. Since in the time of the second Beis Hamikdash there were still 5 things that were missing in the Beis Hamikdash. Hat euch gefällt in the Shleimus von Hepech HaTzeimus. So the full transformation of the fast, that the tragedy and the fast itself should become a source of joy, did not occur yet at that time, and that was still lacking. In the pasuk that pasuk speaks about in the time when Mashiach comes, was dan wird sein der Tachlis Hashleimus euch in Hepech HaTzeimus. Then the full completion of the transformation of the fasts will come to be, and therefore the very fasts and tragedies themselves will become a source of joy. It will be fully transformed. So with this we understand why the Torah brings the pasuk of our Fachti Avlam L'Sasen. It's referring to the third level of the full transformation of the fasts. The Rambam, though, if so, seemingly, is quoting a pasuk, Yeh l'sasen l'simcha, which is not talking about this third level. It's talking about the fact that the sadness, the tragedy or the fast will be nullified, and it will be a time of celebration, but not this transformation of the tragedy itself. However, the Rabbi here will continue and explain that from the language of the Rambam, when he quotes this pasuk, Yeh l'sasan l'simcha, we can see that he also is using this pasuk of Yeh l'sasan l'simcha to explain the full transformation that the Torah speaks about. Based on all this, we can say, coming back to the language of the Rambam, the Rambam brings them pasuk same even though the Rambam brings this pasuk that speaks about what will happen with the fast days, and it just says that it'll be times of celebration. So if so, seemingly the Rambam should have brought much more. Should have brought the pasuk of the Torah where it says that the fast days will be fully transformed. It expresses a much greater level where the actual sadness and fast itself will be a source of celebration. Why doesn't he bring that pasuk? However, we can say, even by quoting this pasuk, what the Rambam means with this is, not as the not only as the symbol of the pshat of the pasuk indicates, that it'll be days that will now be days of joy, not as the tzaim gufe nesapach werden l'sasan l'simcha geimer, but that the very fast and sadness itself will be transformed, it'll become a source of celebration. That's what the Rambam means by bringing this pasuk over here. Where do we see this in the lashon of the Rambam? If the Rambam is quoting this pasuk, seemingly this pasuk doesn't say that. Explanation, if you look into the words of the Rambam that the Rebbe already pointed out in the beginning of the Sikha, we can see this. When the Rambam says that these days will be days of Yom Tovim, kommt in Rambam als Hemshech zum friedigen Fall. This is in the words of the Rambam following what he already said earlier here, that that all the fast days will be nullified. And then the Rambam adds a new point here. And not only this, but even more so, there'll be days of joy, there'll be days of Yom Tov. Now, what do we see here from this expression of the Rambam? Was von dem ist verstandig, from the way the Rambam puts this here, it's understood as the Inyan, von Asidin Liyas Yomim Tovim Chulu. The fact that when Mashiach comes, it'll be days of a Yom Tov, tut auf a Chiddush of the friedige Minyan von Asidin Li Bottle. The Rambam is adding a new novel point that he didn't mention before, when he said that the fast days will be bottled. Ukaloshen, as the Rambam emphasizes, not only the first point, but also the second point, that it will be days of celebration. So the Rebbe, if so, you cannot say, as the Rambam meint the mid blois das was the tag velen veren yomim tovim. We can't say that what the Rambam is referring to here is that these days, they were once before days of a fast, and now the tragedies and the sadness is over, so there's no reason to fast anymore. And now they become days of Yomim Tovim, because the very fact that the fasts are gone, that itself is a reason to celebrate. That can't be what the Rambam is referring to. That comes automatically. If it's a time that was a time of sadness, and now Hashem removes that in itself is a reason to celebrate. This is just, it's natural this way. As when when you have a situation that causes pain and suffering is removed, it inspires joy and it awakens by a person to be joyous in this time period when it remembers how Hashem removed this pain and suffering that wasn't this time. So then there's nothing novel in saying that this will be days of a Yom Tov. It's really all one point. And that's actually the way it says it in the Tosefta quoted before. The Tosefta says it all as one point, that the days will become days of Yom Tov. The fact that the Rambam divides it into 2 points, and he says it is an additional point, that these days will become a Yom Tov, we must say, when the Rambam says that this is a new point, that this will be days of a Yom Tov, is kavanasai as euch that inyan atzaim gufe vet nesapach werden l'sasan chulu. The Rambam must mean by this that the very fasts themselves, the cause and the source of the sadness, will itself become now transformed into being a source of joy. Und if then bringt der Reihe von dem Pasuk as the etzem inyan von tzaim geime, that the very fast itself, that it's the fast that will become into joy. So in other words, the way that Rambam is teaching this pasuk is not in this simple pshat of the pasuk that the days will be days of joy, but in the lashon of the pasuk where it says tzaim revi, tzaim chamishi, it's the tzaim which will become transformed into joy, into a source of joy. It's not the simple pshat of the pasuk, but from the context of the Rambam, we can see that he's bringing the pasuk for this point as well. A raya of them, a proof that you can teach the pasuk this way, as der Pasuk Tzaim Goymer, Yeh Goymer, L'Sassen Goymer, can geteilt werden, euch bescheichet zum Inyan HaTzaim Gufe. It could be explained that it's referring to the transformation of the very fast itself into becoming a source of joy. Gefitmen in Bach. We find this in the way the Bach puts this. V'zel Shayni, and this is the words of the Bach. Parach b'Gemara oifim pasuk kanal. The Gemara asks on this pasuk that there's a contradiction here. Kari leit Tzaim. The pasuk refers to this as fast days, and the Kari leit Sassen. On the other hand, it refers to it as days of joy. What's really bothering the Gemara? The Bach wants to understand, well, the pasuk is actually saying that the days that were once days of fast will become days of joy. So what's really the question of the Gemara? Pirish, so the Bach says as follows: Haloshin einem miyushiv. The language of the pasuk is not yet fully understood well. The mashma, because in the pasuk it seems that hu gufei sasim v'simcha, that the very time, the very fast itself will become joy, mashiach. And that's what the question of the Gemara is, that that's impossible. The very fast itself is a time of suffering and a time of mourning. Therefore, the pasuk should have said differently. The pasuk should have said that the chaydish, which refers to the time period when the fast is, that time period, so the fast will be removed, and instead it will be a time of joy. That's what's bothering the Gemara. So what do we see over here? Zok the Bach. So the Bach is clearly saying, as the word Tzaim Goymer, the fact that it says in the pasuk the term Tzaim, the fast will become a joy. Nit Chaydish Revi Goymer. And the pasuk is not referring to the time of the month, that we're talking about the fourth month, when there's a time when there was a fast. Meint that Inyan HaTzaim Atzmai. So what's hinted here in this is, and this is what the Gemara is asking, that we see that it's saying that the very fast day itself will become transformed into joy. So therefore, the Rambam here, when he quotes this, we can see that the Rambam is bringing it for this point as well. Okay, so now we can see here in the Rambam that there are the various different levels of the transformation of the fast days that you can see clearly in the Rambam, the way he divides it into 2 points. In general, it's 2 points, even though, as the Rebbe said before, it's really 3, because the removal of the fasts automatically brings that it's a time of celebration and joy. And then the fact that the very source of the suffering itself becomes transformed into a source of joy and celebration. Here the Rebbe will relate this back to time of lost Lavai, that this is actually different time periods when Mashiach comes. And what Shem Amal Geret Barucha, it was once explained already at length, wegen Shittas HaRambam in the Miyim for Yemais HaMashiach, regarding the Rambam's opinion of the times, the days when Mashiach comes. As Lishitasai, velon zayin in them tzvei tkufas klolius. That generally speaking, in Yemais HaMashiach, there'll be 2 time periods. And here the Rabbi explains this in another Sicha Barichas to address the fact that the Rambam says that when Mashiach comes, there'll be no change in the nature of the world. It's not going to be a time of miracles. When there are many, many proofs from Sukkim and other places that it will be a time of miracles. And therefore we say as follows, that there are 2 different time periods. Aleph, the Tkufe von Tchilas Yemais HaMashiach. There's the first time period in the beginning when Mashiach comes. Was wegen dem wird gesagt, as ein bin Olam Hazeh Yemais HaMashiach el Shibud Malchus Bulvad. The only thing that distinguishes between the time that we're living in now, in Galus, and when Mashiach comes, is the government, the rulership of government over Yidden, that will be removed from us. There'll be no decrees and no difficulties dealing with any government coming to persecute Yidden. However, on the other hand, the nature of the world will not change at all. Nothing new will change in the world. Nature of the world will continue as it was before. That's the first time period. Then then there'll be a second time period in Yemais HaMashiach, and that's the time period when Tchias HaMeisim will happen. Even the Rambam agrees that then nature of the world will change, and it'll be a new novel things will happen in the way things happen in the world. Nor, as the Rambam says, these are things that will happen later on, and we don't know exactly how this will develop until it will actually happen. And exactly the order of how this will develop is not things that we have to know exactly in advance, and it's not a fundamental thing in Yiddishkeit. The Rebbe bringt in the Rambam in Sefer Hayad. So therefore the Rambam does not quote and talk about this time period in Sefer Hayad, which is a Sefer of Halachas. But these are the two time periods that the Rambam holds of. Rabbi says, move on. So based on this, it's understood, was the Rambam is mechalik, the halacha, in Sefer Chestainis, in zwei Bavas. So the Rambam divides regarding what will happen with the fast days. When Mashiach comes, he divides it into two separate points. While the zwei ayonim anal, in Bittul Atzeimis, Liyemeis HaMashiach, werden sein in zwei besondere Tkufis. Because the two things that will happen in the nullification of the fast days when Mashiach comes will actually occur in two separate time periods. In the Erste Tkufe, in the first time period when Mashiach comes, when es wird werden Shalom Ba'olam, it will be peace in the world, when Batel werden, the Tzeimis, the fast days will be nullified. Ubederech Mamela, and as a result, these days will then become days of celebration. Kanal Sifyud, that's the nature when you remember on these days what was once, the suffering that once was, and now the fact that they're gone, that itself is a reason for celebration. But then the second point, as the Tzayim is Gufe, was Hatzayim Atzmai Tsar, Yogim Van Nochahu, as the Bach writes, that the very fast day itself, which is really the source of mourning and suffering and so on, that itself should be transformed and become a source for joy, isn't there Bechine from Bittel Menhage Shalaylam. Isn't the Bechine from Bittel Menhage Shalaylam. This is already included in changing the nature of the world. The fact that something which we know as today in the nature of the world is a source for suffering becomes a source for joy. That's supernatural. Und der Rebbe wird sich das öftan erst in die zweite Tkufe von Yemais HaMashiach. This is going to be accomplished only in the second time period after Mashiach comes, in the time period of Tchias HaMeisim, and therefore the Rambam says, V'lo yoy, this is the second time period. Okay, so these are the two inyanim that the Rambam speaks about, and we could learn this out from the way the Torah brings it, the pasuk Va'afachti, even though the Rambam doesn't quote that pasuk, but nevertheless, we see here that these are the two things that the Rambam speaks about. So now, the Rebbe brings us back to understanding why the pasuk emphasizes over here Beis Yehuda, that this transformation into joy will happen to Beis Yehuda. The time was the Rambam bringt der Dafke der pasuk Tzayim Goyme Yir le Beis Yehuda le Sassen Goyme und nicht der pasuk Va'afachti Goyme. If really the Rambam, it does mean to hint by bringing this pasuk that this includes also the transformation of the very tragedy itself. So then, why does the Rambam not quote the pasuk Va'afachti that the Torah quotes? And the Rambam Dafka quotes this pasuk where it says the words Beis Yehuda. Is weil das is negeya the inyan from Beis Yehuda, because over here the Rambam wants to bring the pasuk where it says Beis Yehuda. This transformation on this level to such a degree is related to Yehuda. The explanation for this is the Iker Kaishi Hashibud Gzeiris Malchus Chulu, the main harshness of all the decrees and all the persecution that Yidden experienced from Galus is by Beis Yehuda, is by the Shevet of Yehuda that went into Galus to a much greater degree. Not by the Asara Shvatim, not by the other 10 Shvatim, they went into Galus into an earlier time period, and they went to a place on the other side of the Sambatyan, as it says in the Medrash, and they don't have the same kind of suffering. That we went into Galus, but there's the Galus of Shevet Yehuda, and there's the Galus of the Aseret Shvatim, and it's not the same Galus. The real suffering and persecution is only by the Aseret Shvatim. Is only by Beis Yehuda, that is, and not by Aseret Shvatim. Und wie bald ist der Gödel Simcha von die Tzeimis li Meisa Mashiach nimmt sich und ist lefi erech der Gödel Zar von die Tzeimis bis Mana Galus. Now we can understand based on this, since the greatness, the degree of the joy that there is, that comes from these fasts, and when Mashiach comes, where does it come from? It's all based on the level of how much suffering and pain there was in times of suffering in Galus. And that gets transformed and it becomes a source of joy based on what degree the suffering was. That's the degree of joy that will come out of this. So therefore, in order to express how great the joy will be in these times of fast days, when Mashiach comes, so the Rambam quotes the pasuk where it says Beis Yehuda, that this is the suffering of Yehuda in Galus that will be transformed into joy. What's the mitzvah mudgesh with this? What's emphasized is as by zeh v'tesasim v'simcha zayin afil in afil gresser emos, that by Beis Yehuda, which suffered more in Galus, So then when that's transformed into good, so the joy will be to a much greater degree. Hayes says the since the suffering was much harsher, so therefore the joy will be much greater. However, since then, as the Rambam concludes and says that there will be a time where there will be love and peace, and all Yidden will be as one. The Achtus zwischen Yehuda and Yosef, the union, the oneness between Yehuda and Yosef, which includes all Shvatim, all Asara Shvatim. That di Simcha Yisera from Beis Yehuda, so this degree of joy of Beis Yehuda, durchnehmen und herumnehmen alle Yidden. This is going to permeate and include all Yidden, euch the Asara Shvatim Yosef, even all the other 10 Shvatim which are all included in Yosef. So therefore, the Rambam does not quote it the way it said in the Tosefta, that it'll be a joy for all Yidden, including everything as one. Because really the source of this level of transformation, such a degree of joy, comes dafka to Beis Yehuda. That's what the Rambam quotes. However, then the Rambam quotes that from Beis Yehuda, this joy will then also envelop an entire Klal Yisrael. Okay, so now we understand what's the specific emphasis over here regarding Beis Yehuda. However, the Rebbe over here continues and explains that the Rambam over here brings this pasuk of Beis Yehuda, that this is connected specifically to the Avodah of Yehuda, as we'll see here. Hagam as the Agdosha Anal in Beis Yehuda. This emphasis by bringing Beis Yehuda as the Goydel Asimche Nemtzich Davke Mitzad and Koishi Yeshibud. The great joy comes from the great suffering. Was is given mer ubeke by Beis Yehuda, which is experienced primarily by the Shevet Yehuda that went into a harsher galus. Is faran euch in dem zweiten Neufen, der Leel Sivov, as zu lieb dem Bittel Atzeimis, wollen sie werden, that is, Yemei Sassen V'Simcha, that when you nullify these days of tragedy, these days of fasting, and then automatically it comes into days of joy. Right, so regarding the second point that was said before we come to the fact that you transform the very tragedy itself to become a source of joy and celebration, regarding the second point said before, that days which were previously days of suffering and tragedy, so if that's removed and now it becomes days of joy, so by Beis Yehuda, which had more suffering, the joy in these days will be even greater. Was gresse, es ist der Joggen war noch von dem Zeim, als mehr ist die Simche, wenn die Zeim wird bottle. So the greater the suffering was in this time period. Now that it's nullified, the greater the joy that there is on this day. Okay, so this is even regarding the first and second point that was explained before regarding the transformation of the fasts. From deswegen, ibal, the Rambam bringt the pasuk midat goshe from Beis Yehuda. But the Rambam quotes this pasuk, and he quotes the pasuk specifically with Beis Yehuda. Benigay zum dritten Neufen, after he brings the veloy oid, which is the third point. Das was die Zeimis atzma wollen es hapach werden lesassen lesimcha. The fact that the very fast days themselves will become a source for joy and celebration. Darf man sagen, if so we must say, as ich der Inyan, from a hapach sein, dem Tzaim l'sassen chulu, even this point as well, that the Tzaim itself becomes transformed into joy, hot tashayches mit michedes mit Beis Yehuda davke. This is uniquely connected to Beis Yehuda. So it's not only the point before about the tremendous suffering that Beis Yehuda suffers in the harshness of Golus, and therefore davke they will experience the joy and celebration when that is gone, and that's removed loss of lavai. But also this point over here of the transformation of the very suffering itself into joy, that's specifically related to Beis Yehuda. And this the Rebbe will explain according to what it says in Maimonim and Chassidus regarding what the Avodah of Yehuda represents. So the explanation for this, as it's explained in Chassidus, der Unterschied zwischen Yosef und Yehuda in Darges Avodah. The difference between the level of Yosef and the level of Yehuda when it comes to serving Hashem. Yosef is in Yonai Talmud. Yosef represents the Avodah of learning Torah. That's what the name Yosef means. Yosef is when a person keeps on adding, which is in learning. When a person learns, you can always add and understand more and greater on a higher level. That's the experience of learning. Which is Gili Elokus L'mayla Lamata. In learning, you're bringing down a revelation of godliness from above to below. Because in learning, the words of the Torah are holy. And you're bringing down the holy words of Hashem into your mind, into the world, applying it. That's a Gili of godliness from above to below. That's what Yosef represents. And Yonishal Yehuda is Maisa. Yehuda is action. The word Yehuda means a person that's Maida. In Chassidus it says it means not only a person that thanks, but it means also a person that submits himself. And that's what action is. When you do the action without any questions. And that is birur v'zichur chamata. So therefore, what the avodah of Yehuda represents is when a person engages in action. He's engaging with the material part of the world to elevate and refine the lowest aspects of the world below. That's what Yehuda represents. So here we see two opposite focuses in Yosef and Yehuda. Both Yosef and Yehuda are here to connect the Eibishter to the world. Yosef is Mamayla Lamata, and Yehuda is from below to elevate the world below. From the Chelek zwischen Gilui Elokus Mamayla Lamata und Zichur Chamata, one of the differences that there is between these two approaches, whether it's by bringing godly revelation from above to below, or by refining and elevating the world from below. When you introduce into the world a very strong godly revelation, which doesn't recognize the darkness of the world, it just dispels darkness, it removes darkness, it brings the truth of the Eibishter into the world, and then there's no room for darkness at all. That's when you reveal the truth of the Eibishter from above. That's Yosef. However, when you refine the world from below, what you're accomplishing is you're transforming the existence of the world itself, the darkness itself. You're revealing the goodness and the positivity that there is in the world itself, and you're transforming it into light. Transforming the darkness itself into light. So therefore, if it's only the level of Yosef, Yosef brings a tremendous godly revelation into the world, which nullifies the tragedy and the suffering and the darkness of the world. But then the deeper accomplishment that comes from Yehuda is that the very sadness and the fast itself, you reveal the positivity and the goodness of the Eibishter that's hidden in it, and you mezachich, you refine and show that this itself is godly. There's a godly intention in this, and you reveal the truth of the Eibishter in the darkness itself. That's why the Rambam, when he speaks about the transformation of the very fast day itself, he's bringing the pasuk where it emphasizes Beis Yehuda, because Dafka Beis Yehuda is the one that bring this kind of transformation. Now, this is connected to the previous point. This is connected to the previous point that Dafke Shevet Yehuda is the one that went into a harsher golus. So the point here is as follows. These 2 points are connected because as far as the level of Yosef is concerned, what is Yosef? Gilui Elokos Mamayla Lamata, revealing the truth of the Eibishter from above to below. Is the Avodah Poel Nar and Azam Mata Vasat HaKaponim HaShayches Tza'ir. This revelation from above could only reach a level of a place of an existence, a mata, the world here below, that has some kind of a connection to this revelation. The revelation means that it reveals the truth of the Eibishter. So in a place which recognizes this truth, that's where the revelation is. But on the other hand, when it comes to the level of Yehuda, which is Zichur Chamata, Yehuda has the power to refine and elevate the existence of the world below, which is disconnected, unassociated. It's Chayshech. And the Gili doesn't reach there. No revelation can reach there. Now it's the existence of the Mata, which is void. It's completely empty of any revelation. Over here, the accomplishment is that it reaches a lower level of mata. It reaches into a place which is where the gilu, where revelation does not come there, does not say anything there. Adarab, this is a mata that is just I'm here. It's separated. So the strength of this darkness, and even when there's a very harsh shibud of galus, will be purified and refined and elevated. And then it becomes transformed from darkness into light. So we see how these 2 points go together. The difference between the Mulmayla Lamata and the Mulmata Lamayla, or the Zichur Chamata. So the Rebbe is saying there's 2 differences here. One is Mulmayla Lamata is Mevatel the Chayshech. And the Zichur Mulmata is not Mevatel. It refines, it elevates, it reveals the positivity. It's Mahapach, the Tachten itself. And then the other point, the degree of what level of Mata does it reach. A Gilui Mulmayla, by nature, the idea of Gilui is that it's here to reveal the truth of the Eibishter. Revelation is in a place where there's revelation, which is a keli for revelation, but not an existence of a Mata that's not a keli for that. So it doesn't reach the real Tachten, the real lowest place in the world. Whereas the zichur hamata, where you're revealing and transforming the darkness itself, that elevates even from the lowest place. Und der Fahr, was the Avodah von Yehuda is in Makam HaChoshech, from the Mata B'Yoser. So because the place of the Avodah of Yehuda is even in the lowest elements of the world, the Greich, the Avodah Natzmusi is Barach. So therefore, this is the kind of Avodah that is really bringing the very essence of the Eibishter into the world. Hecher from Bechinas Giluyim, higher than any level of revelation. Any level of revelation means that it has to be, it only reaches to a level that's associated to this level of revelation. It's expressing something. It's expressing something specific, which could only reach a level, a place which is related to that nature of revelation. The essence of the Eibishter is beyond any definition that defines where it could be a keli for it, where not. The essence of the Eibishter is the essence of the truth, the essence of existence. And therefore that is even in the very lowest place, which is removed of revelation, but it's the essence of the Eibishter, which is the essence of everything. That's Atzmus, which is revealed even in the lowest place. Similar to what it says in other places, the advantage that there is in the Avodah of Bali Tshuva over Tzadikim, talking before about the transformation of the fast days, which is through the Avodah of Tshuva. So this whole Inyan is the whole Maila of a Bal Tshuva over a Tzadik. As you Bal Zer Avodah is mitzad harichuk, because the Bal Tshuva serves the Eibishter as a result of the distance, not because he feels gilu, not because he feels revelation. On the contrary, it all comes by him feeling disconnected. The Greich Zi in Atzmos. This kind of Avodah, the Bal Tshuva, that is completely disconnected. And nevertheless, he's doing Tshuva. What's triggering this? Where does this come from? It's not from any revelation. It's the essence of the Eibishter himself. And therefore, this is even greater than the Avodah of Tzadikim. Und das ist der Chiluk zwischen der Geule, wie sie ist mitzad Yosef, und wie sie ist mitzad Yehuda. So this explains the difference between redemption on the level when it comes from Yosef and when it comes from the level of Yehuda, which the Rambam emphasizes when he says the Geula that comes from base Yehuda. Mitzad Yosef, this is an Anayfim Fun, Yigal Chotov. On the level of Yosef, this is a level of Geula where the Pasuk describes this, a Geula that is revealing the Eibishter's goodness in the world. A Geula was is verbunden mit Eur Vegile. Goodness means that this is something which is already in a revealed, expressed sense that you could experience a certain level of goodness. That's the idea of Eur Vegili, when it's expressing goodness. Mitzad Yehuda aber is Vegal Ticha Anoichi. Over here, the pasuk says that it's I, Hashem himself, which redeems you. It can't be experienced in any way. It's not a revealed or expressed good. It's the very essence of everything. It's the essence of truth. It's the essence of Eibishter himself. The Geula is Durach Atzmusi Yisbarach. This is the Geula from the very essence of the Eibishter himself. And that's the Geula of Beis Yehuda, when the lowest aspect of darkness itself gets transformed. And that happens, Dafke in the Koishi Yeshibud, in the lowest place of Golas, that Dafke Beis Yehuda was placed into, where there's the lowest level of darkness. So now, based on this, the Rebbe comes back to the two time periods that we spoke about before, in the times of Yemei Mashiach. Al Pizeh is noch mehr move on. With this we can understand even better the Sheiches zwischen Tzayim Goyme Yil Beis Yehuda L'Sassen Goyme to the Zweite Tkufe in Yemei Mashiach. What's the connection of the emphasis here of Beis Yehuda, that it becomes a time of joy? To this is specifically in the second time period of Mashiach. In addition to the point that was explained before, as the inyan from Hepach Hatzayim Gufa, the fact that the very fast itself becomes transformed into joy, is an inyan from Bittul Menhage Shalaylam, that this is something which is supernatural and therefore it's related to the second time period of Mashiach. But here we can see that there's an additional point why Dafke, this transformation which is coming from Beis Yehuda, is in the second time period when Mashiach comes. Because as follows: Ki yiduatz nom zenedan olam haba tzvei aliyos. The times of olam haba, olam haba is not these two time periods of Yemei Mashiach. Olam haba is already a different time period after Yemei Mashiach. Now, regarding olam haba, it's known that there are two levels. Aleph, one is the sudas levyasan v'sher abar, the time period when there'll be a suda with the levyasan and the sher abar, and inyan fun dugme fun achile v'shtiyah. There's going to be something that could be compared to eating and drinking. That is, this is dependent on the Shitta of the Rambam and the Ravid, whether this will be physically or it's all a mashal, but it's a time period related to eating and drinking. Beis, then there's what Chazal say, Olam haba ein by that in Olam haba there's no eating, there's no drinking. So there's a contradiction here. So it's two different time periods. In an earlier time period, there'll be a Suda, that will be the celebration of Olam Haba, and then there'll be a time period which will be Ein B'Lo Achila. The Chelek B'Neihem. So this is explained that what's the difference between these two time periods of Olam Haba. Der een van Achille V'Shti and Olam Haba meint the time from Masik Zayin, die time made Teire V'Zvel Demelt Neskalaven. The fact that Chazal describe it as a time period of eating and drinking, this refers to, just like when a person eats and drinks, you digest the food and it enters Bepnimius, so too, this is a time period when Yidden will grasp and understand the deep secrets of the Torah that will then be revealed. Which is accomplished through the Avodah of Torah mitzvahs today, and they'll be revealed in this time period in Olam Haba. And the zweite Aliyah wird nisgala werden atzmusi yisbarach was es hecher from beginnes Giluyim. Then comes the second time period where the very essence of the Eibishter is revealed beyond any level of revelation where a person can grasp and see the secrets in the depth of Torah. And therefore this is not something that can come down and can be digested and can be understood, Chachme, similar to eating and drinking. Und das wird getan durch die Tnuah von Tshuva. This is accomplished not through the Aveda of Torah mitzvahs, which is in general the Aveda of Tzadikim, but there's a deeper Aveda that brings this revelation, as mentioned before, the Aveda of Tshuva. Und azayech durch Mesiris Nefesh of Torah mitzvahs, was wird nis eure al die Lachatz v'doichek hashibuf von Zman HaGolus. Or more generally, not only Tshuva, but Bechlal, all the Aveda of the self-sacrifice that Yidden have throughout the times of Golus, because of the persecution that Yidden experience, and Yidden have so much Mesiris Nefesh in the time of Golus, the depth of that Aveda will be revealed in the second time period of Olam Haba, which is bringing the very essence of the Eibush in the world. This is what it says regarding Olam Haba. So V'yeshleimar, now based on this we can say, as al derech zeh, similar, is the chiluk zwischen die zwei tkufas anal Yemais HaMashiach. Is also the difference when it comes to the two time periods mentioned before when Mashiach comes, the time period where the world will just be continuing in its nature, and Yidden will just enjoy peace without any persecution, and then the time period when there will be miracles. The erste Tkufe, in the first time period, that means ein pnuyim b'Torah v'chachmasa. Yidden will be free to learn and to dwell on Hashem, and to delve, that is, into Hashem's Torah, al derech achila shtiya anal. Similar to the time period when there's eating and drinking, is an inyan from Giluyim. This is the time period when the Aveda of Torah mitzvahs will bring the godly revelation into the world. That's the first time period. The zweite Tkufe, however, when it comes to the second time period, when then the time of Tchias HaMeisim, and when the nature of the world will completely be nullified, al derech, ein by achila anal, similar to the time period in Olam Haba, where there's no eating and drinking at all, is mitzad atzmusi yisbarach. This is the time period related and caused by the Aveda of Tshuva Mesiris Nefesh, which brings the very essence of the Eibush in the world. And the far is the sasam v'simcha from Beis Yehuda. So therefore the joy that comes from Beis Yehuda shayach to the zweite tkufa from Yemais HaMashiach. This gives us a deeper understanding of why this is related to the second time period of Yemais HaMashiach. Weil the Aveda from Yehuda in Kaishi Shibud, der Greich ben Atzmusi Yisbarach Kanal. Because specifically Beis Yehuda, that experienced the lowest level of Galus, and they reached the lowest Tachtain, the lowest Mata. And therefore this also brings out the Aveda of Mesiris Nefesh, which is connected to the very essence of the Eibishter. This is what's going to be revealed in the second time period, when then the very Titus itself gets transformed. And therefore the Rambam is quoting here this pasuk of Beis Yehuda in relation to this second point, the transformation of the tiniest in the second time period of Yemais HaMashiach. So this concludes the explanation of the Rambam, the two parts of the transformation of the tiniest, Lasad Lavai. Now the Rebbe comes back to Asara B'Tevis. Alpi, Kolanal, that man euch verstehen, the Sheiches, from Kolanal to Asara B'Tevis. We understand now the connection specifically that there is, even more from the fast Bechlal to Asara B'Tevis. Wegen Asara B'Tevis steht in Avud Raham. Avud Raham says about this fast, as opposed to others, that Asara B'Tevis, even if it would fall out on a Shabbos, this fast that could be pushed, it cannot be pushed off to another day, because it says in Yecheskel regarding the fast of Asara B'Tevis, this expression of Be'etzem Hayom Hazeh, K'may B'Yom Kippurim, just like Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur falls out on Shabbos, you fast on Shabbos. So therefore, if Asara B'Tevis would fall out on Shabbos, you would have to fast on Shabbos. Now the calendar is set up in such a way that it does not fall out on Shabbos, but if it would fall out on Shabbos, you would have to fast. As a tam, so we could say that the reason for this is as follows. The tainus von Asara b'Tevis is mitzadem was demol tatzachon goyim dem motzer of Yerushalayim. The fast day of Asara b'Tevis is because this is the day when the siege was placed on the city of Yerushalayim. Was das hat angoyim on sof the feet to the spette de Gemoros. This is what began and then led eventually to the later occurrences in Shabbos b'Tammuz when Nifka Ir on the 17th of Tammuz when the wall of the city was breached. On Tisha B'Av, Hochorben Beis HaMikdash, and then the 9th of Av when the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. On Gimel B'Tishrei, which is Harigas Gedalia. Gimel B'Tishrei when Gedalia was killed, and that caused a further dispersion of all Yidden out of Eretz Yisrael. On Vibalt, as that is the Mokke von alle Tzares Chulu, since this is the source of all the suffering that followed, hat sich a Chumre of the andere Tzemes. So therefore it has a greater stringency more than all other fasts, that if it would fall out on Shabbos, you would have to fast on this day. So now, based on what we learned before regarding the harshness of Golus, and over here, Asara b'Tevis is the harshest of all the fasts, we can understand also, as far as the transformation is concerned, that in Asara b'Tevis, the transformation will be on a different level. Ibalt, as it's saying from Asara b'Tevis, is the Makkah from the Aladalat Tzemis. So since this fast, the Asara b'Tevis, is the source for all following fasts, is verstandig, so it's understood, as the Tshuva was that same Ruftareis. So the level of tshuva that this fast should inspire is b'yasa seis v'yasa oz v'di tshuva duruch the andere tzemes. It should be with a much greater intensity than the tshuva on any of the other fast days. Ubemele, the greichtes and atzmusi is barach heche v'di tshuva from the andere tzemes. And therefore, this is the ultimate tshuva that draws the essence of the Eibishter into the world more than all other fasts. Al derech v'sat sich gerat frie in the Meile from Beis Yehuda, as explained before regarding the harshness of suffering in Golus that's related specifically to Beis Yehuda, so too it's this fast day, the source of all suffering and the harshest of all fasts, that brings out the deepest tshuva and brings out the deepest transformation then. And das is the teichin pnimi in the minyan vos. This is the deeper understanding of what the Avud Raham says, that even if it would fall out on Shabbos, you would fast even on Shabbos itself. Val b'pnimi yusai is a hechef in Shabbos. Because really, in this fast, we have a deeper connection to the Eibishter, to the very essence of the Eibishter, that's even higher than Shabbos. V'derelui in the inu fi Yom Kippurim. Similar to the level of that there is in the fast of Yom Kippur. The fact that we fast on Yom Kippur is similar to the time period when Mashiach comes, when we will not have to eat at all. And therefore it's even greater than the joy and the eating and the drinking that there is on Shabbos. So this Asara b'Tevis, which is the source and the harshest fast and the suffering of Yidden, this is really the source of the greatest joy that's really in it, b'pnimius, that will be revealed when Mashiach comes. Warum? Durch der Avedas HaTshuva. From them time, it's because through the Aveda of Tshuva that one expresses in the fasting on this day, the Langman and Atzmusi is Barach, he reached the very essence of the Eibishter himself, which will ultimately be revealed in the time period of Olam Haba, in the latest and the highest time period of Olam Haba, when there'll be no eating and drinking, it'll be just a revelation of the very essence of the Eibishter himself.